Well, the UK has a new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. We're going to look now at what it really means for post-Brexit Britain and the world. Joining us live is Professor Tim Harcourt, Chief Economist at the University of Technology in Sydney. Tim, politically it was pretty important, wasn't it, for Rishi Sunak when it came to the crunch that he was unopposed?
I think that's right. After the long election campaign they had with Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, and also the sort of destabilisation before to Boris Johnson, I think they needed almost more of a coronation than another lengthy destabilising election. So I think that's in the end why Boris pulled out, and Penny Morchant was going to stay in there for a little bit while longer, but then she was also persuaded to put her back in her knapsack and try again at a future date.
So do you think that's right, that Boris Johnson really just wanted unity in the party? There's been a lot of conjecture about why he didn't put his hand up again in the end. Do we read into that he doesn't have ambitions to lead again, or did he just not have the numbers?
I think he's always going to have ambitions, Boris being Boris, and he's, of course, a biographer of Winston Churchill, who was famous for making very successful comebacks. So, Ash, I think you're right. I think he just didn't have the numbers. And basically, you had to get to 100 MPs to force a ballot of the Tory party in general. So he couldn't get there. So he didn't have the numbers. So I think he put his ambition aside. And although they thought Boris's numbers would swing to Penny, she didn't manage to get enough either. So that was it. And, Rishi Sunak is unopposed as Prime Minister, meeting King Charles tomorrow.
And so how does the new PM differ from Liz Truss politically, and importantly, what do we do differently from Liz Truss in the last few weeks?
Well, he's factually different, and I think one mistake Liz Truss made is that she only put her supporters in cabinet, or everyone that voted against her she froze out. So I think Sunak will probably see the broad factions of the Tory party and try and make them representative around the cabinet table. The other thing I think too is that Rishi Sunak was chancellor for a long time, particularly during the pandemic, so he's probably more economically better prepared to be Prime Minister than Liz Truss. She had a short time in trade and as Foreign Minister, while he was chancellor for quite some time, during quite a important time in terms of the pandemic. So that experience of Chancellor of the Exchequer generally, I think, makes you a better Prime Minister. So that is probably in his favour.
And so what are his plans, do we know, for economic management? Do we know how he's planning to get the UK out of the doldrums that it's found itself in?
I don't think Ash will be doing the Truss budget of giving tax cuts to the rich that were unfunded. I think he'll shelve all that, as the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has announced. So I think he'll be looking at a balance between dealing with the fallout of COVID and the need for more growth in the UK economy, and also they're facing a pretty difficult winter in terms of energy. So that'll be a huge challenge for him in terms of cost of living and energy crisis, given the winter that Britain's about to go into. He won't want to have a winter of discontent that brought down the Callaghan government in the 70s. He won't want any repeat of that, so we have to tread very carefully in terms of energy costs.
Tim, it's one thing to have the support of your colleagues to lead. How will that translate, though, with voters?
That's a really big question, Ash. I wonder whether there's a view that Boris was able to hold what they call the red wall. The Tory party won a lot of traditional Labor seats in the north of England in the previous manufacturing areas. It's a question of whether Rishi Sunak can hold those types of seats, because that will make a big difference at the general election. And we do know that whilst even against Liz Truss, he won easily in terms of MPs, but he didn't win the popular vote amongst the Tory party leaders. And I think, Penny Morchant was trying to push for that party vote. So it will take but he has time on his side. You don't have to call a general election in Britain until early 2025 at the very latest, more likely to be in 2024. So he does have time on his side and a majority to build some trust with the electorate. But I'd imagine the Labor Party, Sir Keir Starmer and the troops would think they're a pretty good chance against him.
Tim Harcourt, always appreciate your insights. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ash. Let's see how he goes.